Hey everyone, this is Misha here, and today I have a little tarot review for you of the Ghoulish Garb's Terror Tarot. Now, this deck is a major arcana only deck, which makes me a little sad because it's really cool. But, oh gosh, it's such a cool deck. So, I'll bring it up and show you. It's actually, the box it comes in is almost like a book. So that's really neat because you could set it on a bookcase, and it's even got the name of it on the spine, which is really neat. It's really beautifully made. The box itself is the magnetic closure opening style. And I mean, oh, it's just so pretty. It's just, I really am in love with the artwork in this deck. The book is pretty small, but that makes sense because it is a major only, so there's not as many cards. For those of you that are new to tarot, the tarot deck has 78 cards, and the some of them are what we call majors, and so I'll flip through those in a minute, and then the rest of the deck is the minors and the court cards. Some people consider the court cards part of the minors, so it just depends on how you look at it, but this deck only has the major cards, so it won't have the court cards or the aces and twos and threes and all those. So the book itself is really pretty. It has about 1 page dedicated to each card, and it's full color, which is really nice. And well, actually, I guess technically some of them have multiple pages. It's about 1.5 pages sometimes. What I really like about it is it talks to you about the symbolism that's on this particular card. So that's kind of neat because this really does give you an idea of what the artist was thinking when they were creating the deck, and also what the symbolism is in this particular tarot themed deck. So let's take a look at the cards. So the box has a velvet lined box, which is really nice. It has the little ribbon, which I really appreciate because whenever I have the boxes that have the indentions like this, I always have a really hard time getting the cards out. So in terms of if you wanted to keep this as just a display deck, or as a deck that maybe you would not use very often, but maybe you're a tarot collector and you just want to keep it around, the box itself is really nice. The back of the deck is the moon artwork that we saw inside the card, which is really nice, and it has the matte edges. A lot of people right now are into the edges that have the shimmer, and I really like these because they've got the matte black. And the cards themselves are also matte, which is really, really, really nice. I think that's really cool. So I'll go through the artwork for you. So here we have the Fool, and some of the work is really similar to the traditional RWS deck. Some of it is a little bit different. So that Fool is pretty similar. And then we have the Magician, which is really neat. It's kind of a mad scientist action going on. We've got, this is probably one of my favorite cards in the whole deck, the High Priestess. So we have Medusa as the High Priestess, which I really, really love. If you know the Medusa mythology, she was actually transformed into Medusa because she was had relations in a temple. Most people consider it against her will. So I think it's kind of neat that she gets to be the High Priestess here because she was transformed into something monstrous, but we never really consider her side of it. We always hear of Perseus being the hero and conquering her, but I like to think of her as that priestess, and it's really neat. Like, you can, like, the detail is incredible. Like, this is just really, really spectacular. So really, really nice work there. And then our Empress is the female vampire, the lady. She's kind of sitting in that classic pose that we often see the Empress in. Again, beautiful detail. Like, the line work of this is amazing. It's super bold. And you can see the cards aren't matte, so you're not getting any glare in this video because we have the Empress as the female vampire. The Emperor is the masculine, I guess you could say feminine versus male. But I also kind of like these because there's, for me, they also could be interpreted as gender neutral. That is my own interpretation of that particular one. You can see it however you want, but I do think it's nice that they're a little ambiguous there. This is another one of my favorite cards. This is the Hierophant coming in as Cthulhu. There's so much we could say about that. Like, it's just really neat. The idea of the ancient wisdom, studying and studying and studying, and then, you know, what do you bring out when you do all those studies? What do you bring forth? The Lovers. This is an interesting one. We have a very similar RWS interpretation, but now we have, I guess you could call it death in the background. And I really like that the snake that stood up for evil in the garden is around Eve and encircling her. And both of them are kind of shown as they're like little demons. So you've got the volcano going off in the background and the tree of knowledge burning, and really kind of speaks to that idea of what love can be, the passion, but also the unexpected consequences, which is kind of cool. We'll move this guy. We've got the Chariot coming in with the Mummy. Very classical interpretation. Strength is another one of my favorites. Cerberus, and what I really love about it, instead of the lady and the lion that we often see, we've got Persephone down there. So, you know, she, for those of you that don't know that mythology, she went down into Hades, into hell, and some people consider that to be something that was against her will, but some people feel that no, she went, she knew what she was going into, and she did it willingly and sacrificed herself, and the great strength that took. So that's another really neat interpretation on that card. For the Hermit, we have Charon and the Ruler Sticks, the Ferryman, one of the most alone souls, right? Because his job is to ferry the dead across and brings them to their final place of rest. For number 10, our Wheel of Fortune, we've got this guy. So we have a clock tower, and this is a really good example. I am not 100% familiar with this particular horror story, if it is a story or if it's just the artist's interpretation. So one of the things I like about this is I'll be able to read in the book and find out a little bit more about it. So that is super cool. And justice, of course, is death. In the end, we all get our comeuppance. It's a very classic Grim Reaper. They have the sickle. They've got the hourglass reminding us that in the end, we will all reach our place of justice. And the Hanged Man is a puppet. So that's an interesting interpretation of that. And again, he's hanging by a thread, but I think it's neat to notice that a lot of the strings are kind of broken and loose, so it often does give that kind of idea that he's hanging on his own will, and he's got himself hung there, but it's not necessarily, could be considered as a bad thing, but it doesn't have to be. This is another one of my faves. This is death. And I figure since we had the Grim Reaper for justice, why repeat that, right? So instead, we have death coming as the Headless Horseman. And in the RWS card, death is shown on a pale horse, and folks are begging to survive. And I love the interpretation of this, of the Irving story of the main characters begging the Headless Horseman to spare them. It's a really neat idea for that death card. For Temperance, really kind of classic idea of the graveyard angel crying. This might also, I don't know if this is directly related to the Doctor Who angels or not. I have to check in the book and see, but I just thought that this was a really, really nice idea of understanding that balance that comes in Temperance. Because in the graveyard, we're all equal, right? We all find our balance. And then, I don't know, you know, the devil, it's pretty much the devil, you know. And it's interesting because we see the Lovers, the couple from the Lovers repeats. This time they're in chains. The horns are a little different color. So they've shifted from this place to this one. And we have a similar, it's interesting, the cards are similar. So it's a neat thing to consider whether you're in that place of the Lovers or the place of the Devil. And then the Tower. I often really like to look at the Tower cards in decks. Oftentimes this is something that really helps me define whether or not I'm gonna like a deck because of the way the Tower is portrayed. I really love this one. And we've got the lightning that we see quite a bit in the RWS. Pieces of the tree are burning. They're falling like burning brands in the night. And what I love about this is it looks like one of the figures in the Tower went willingly and the other one kind of got surprised and knocked out. And for me, that's a big part of the Tower, whether or not you see what's coming and decide to go, or whether you're caught unawares. And so I love the way this one is done. And of course, to give it that added horror flair, we have the tree growing from the roots. But this is also neat too, because it reminds me that it's growing from the roots of the ancestors, right? So everything we experience has come before. Our ancestors have all been through it. So perhaps if we look to them for some knowledge, that will help us get through those Tower moments. I love the star. It's a mermaid, or probably more appropriate, a siren. She does have some skulls around her. She may be luring men to their doom, but I think she's quite lovely. And of course we have the bright, beautiful star around her as well. The moon. So what would we have in a horror deck if we didn't have the werewolf for the moon? And again, we have a variation on the crawfish or the lobster. Sometimes it's a crab that you see in some of the RWS decks and their clones. And here we are, that moment of transformation, but also because we're talking about the moon, right? What is hidden and what is unseen. Can look like a regular guy, but turns out he's a werewolf. So I think that's a really, I mean, most horror decks, yeah, you'd use the werewolf for the moon. I could see that. But I actually like the fact that he's kind of in the moment of transformation, because it really does speak to that idea of what is hidden and unseen. And we're coming down to the end. We still have a couple of really beautiful cards. Sorry, everybody. Did not mean to kick the tripod. This is the Sun. And what I love about this deck is it brings in some different cultural stuff, different traditions from many different lands. And so this one speaks to a lot of, we've got the sunflowers happening here that we see in the Sun card traditionally, but again, because it's a horror deck, we bring in that idea of witchcraft and the idea of even in the lightness, we do have a little bit of darkness potentially. So I think that that's a really neat take on that card. And then our last two cards, we have Judgment, and I really like that it's a witch. To me, this reminds me of a necromancer, and she's erasing the souls of the dead, which I think is kind of a neat idea. It's a different take on that one than we normally see. And then finally, the World. What an interesting way to wrap this one up. So here we have that old idea of Jekyll and Hyde, right? And I think that, you know, if you're going to have a deck about horror, I often think of the World and the Sun as being a few of the victory cards in the deck. And I don't know how victorious this World card is. This one kind of reminds me a little bit of remembering to be careful what you wish for, right? Like here we have someone who's taking a potion and this is what he becomes. So be careful about how you view your world and how you impact it. But I also love that, again, we have the traditional RWS symbols that pop up in most of the World cards. And I think this author did an amazing job of really like weaving in the RW symbols and symbolism, as well as their own take on it. So there you have it. That is the Ghoulish Garb's Terror Tarot. It is a major arcana deck and it is available on Etsy. I will put in the title of the video in the comment section. I'll put the author of it. What I particularly love is this is pretty much personally created by the author. And so she sells this on Etsy and the Ghoulish Garb kind of makes their own deck and has been very successful with it. So I appreciate you watching this video. I love sharing tarot with people, and I think this is a really cool deck and I'm excited to share it with you. And I hope you guys will go and support the artist that created these and the Ghoulish Garb. And just really consider this as an opportunity to check out a cool tarot deck and bring them into your practice. There you go.